The facade of women's professional tennis is crumbling in real time, and the executives cannot stop the bleeding. Right now, the highest-ranking officials at the WTA are in absolute meltdown mode. For years, CEO Steve Simon and his tight circle of corporate cronies operated a rigged system. It was an enterprise perfectly designed to break the very players who generate their massive revenues. But their calculated lies are finally unraveling on the world stage. Brave truth-tellers like Elena Rybakina, Mirra Andreeva, and Swiatek are standing up to this unchecked corruption. These women are exposing a vicious, undeniably toxic cycle of procedural failures. They are shining a massive spotlight on the targeted rulebook weaponization used against them. The undeniable corporate greed is now out in the open for everyone to see. The documents prove that the WTA is not a player-first organization. The reality is that it functions as a ruthless dictatorship, currently in a state of freefall. The tour relies on bullying its brightest stars into silent submission, but the players are fighting back against the machine. Here are the top 10 WTA drama moments that undeniably prove the system is completely rigged. Number 10. The Montreal Midnight Trap. In August of 2023, Elena Rybakina was forced into a grueling, dangerous battle against Daria Kasatkina at the National Bank Open. The conditions were abysmal, and the scheduling was a total procedural failure. The match did not officially finish until nearly 3 in the morning. The WTA knowingly pushed an elite athlete to the brink of total physical collapse just to satisfy lucrative television contracts. This was a deliberate, calculated choice by a weak leadership team to prioritize broadcast profits over human health. Rybakina was completely destroyed physically by the end of the marathon match. Yet, she bravely stepped up to the microphone and called out the tour's horrific scheduling practices. She laid the blame squarely on the executives who orchestrated the nightmare. But what happened next was even more shocking. Number 8. The gag order on exhaustion. Instead of issuing a formal apology, the WTA viciously doubled down on their mistake. They forced Rybakina to play her critical semifinal match the very next afternoon. The executives gave her zero time to recover from the physical trauma they deliberately caused. She stepped onto the court completely drained and inevitably lost the match. The system brutally punished the hero for merely surviving its own administrative incompetence. Steve Simon and the wealthy executives refused to take a single ounce of accountability. They expected Rybakina to quietly pack her bags, accept her fate, and protect the brand. They desperately wanted her silenced. But the reality is, Rybakina's voice only grew louder. Her bravery exposed the deep, systemic rot festering at the very top of the sport. Number 8. The Wimbledon Grass Cover-Up. Fast forward to the pristine courts of Wimbledon. 16-year-old prodigy Mirra Andreeva was taking the entire tennis world by storm. She was playing phenomenal tennis and posed a genuine threat to the established, heavily marketed order. During a highly contested, crucial point, Andreeva lost her footing on the notoriously slippery grass surface. Her racket slipped from her hand and hit the ground. It was an undeniable, completely unavoidable accident, but the establishment needed a reason to put the young, fearless underdog in her place. They saw an opportunity to break her momentum and assert their absolute authority. Number 7. The weaponized point penalty. The chair umpire immediately seized the moment and handed Andreeva a devastating point penalty. The official cited violent racket abuse, which was a blatant and calculated lie. The high-definition video evidence clearly proves Andreeva slipped on the dangerous turf. Yet, the official blindly and maliciously enforced a strict rule to punish the teenager. This specific penalty gave her opponent an unearned match point, effectively handing over the victory. The system literally stole a massive career milestone from a 16-year-old girl. It was a targeted procedural execution disguised as upholding the rules. Number 6. The media assassination. After the match concluded, the WTA and its allied media network went on the offensive. They deliberately framed Andreeva as a spoiled, immature child throwing a tantrum on the world's biggest stage. They completely ignored the dangerous court conditions that caused the slip in the first place. They offered absolutely no sympathy for a young, vulnerable player navigating her first major tournaments. Instead, they actively tried to ruin her reputation and paint her as the villain. They needed a scapegoat to cover up their own glaring inadequacies. The executives weaponized their press contacts to launch a smear campaign. They tried to break her spirit, but they failed completely. Number 5. The Tokyo performance by manipulation. The systemic rigging definitely does not stop at the major Grand Slams. Later in the year, the WTA desperately manipulated its own rulebook at the Pan-Pacific Open in Tokyo. They abruptly introduced a convoluted, nonsensical performance buy system. This new rule blatantly bypassed the official, established world rankings. Elena Rybakina, despite being a top seed and a reigning Grand Slam champion, was maliciously stripped of her earned first-round bye. The executives instead handed the massive advantage to lower-ranked players who fit their specific, preferred marketing narrative. It was a rigged draw, plain and simple. It was a deliberate, financial, and competitive attack on a player who dared to speak out against them. Number 4. The Cancun announcement cover-up. Nothing exposes the sheer villainy and incompetence of Steve Simon more than the 2023 WTA Finals. Just weeks before the most prestigious, most lucrative event of the entire year, the WTA literally had no venue. They were desperately chasing massive payouts from Saudi Arabian sponsors, but completely failed to secure the deal in time. In a state of pure corporate panic, Simon announced Cancun, Mexico as the host city. He knew perfectly well it was the middle of hurricane season. He knew there was no existing tennis stadium capable of hosting the event. He did it anyway, repeatedly lying to the players and the press about the readiness of the tournament. It was a multi-million-dollar fraud perpetrated against the best athletes in the world. Number 3. The golf course disaster. When the elite players finally arrived in Mexico, the reality was worse than a nightmare. They found a hastily constructed, makeshift court literally built directly on top of a local golf course. The playing surface was dangerously uneven, littered with dead spots and safety hazards. The promised practice courts were entirely incomplete, forcing Grand Slam champions to train at a public hotel facility. The undeniable WTA executives hid safely inside their climate-controlled luxury suites. Meanwhile, the athletes risked catastrophic, career-ending injuries on a fundamentally defective court. It was the ultimate betrayal of trust by a deceitful leadership. Number 2. The player mutiny. The women finally reached their breaking point and had absolutely enough. 21 of the world's best players, including the brave heroes of the sport, united in defiance. They drafted a formal, heavily documented letter directly to Steve Simon and the board. They demanded fair financial compensation, flexible scheduling, and basic physical safety standards. They successfully cornered the villain in his own web of lies. Simon's highly anticipated response was a pathetic, completely empty corporate statement. He offered zero tangible solutions and adamantly refused to step down. He desperately clung to his dwindling power as the entire tour collapsed around his ears. Number 1. The ultimate triumph over corruption. Despite the torrential wind, the driving rain, and the treacherous, unsafe court conditions, Iga Swiatek refused to break. She fought relentlessly through the entire Cancun nightmare. She played flawless tennis and did not drop a single set throughout the entire rigged tournament. She utterly humiliated the WTA executives by proving her brilliance could outshine their catastrophic incompetence. Swiatek's dominant victory was a massive, undeniable defeat for Steve Simon and his cronies. The heroes definitively won the battle on the court, but the larger war against the oppressive WTA playbook was just beginning. This brings us to the shocking, undeniable truth about how the system operates behind closed, locked doors. For decades, the WTA has utilized a highly secretive, deeply punitive operational playbook. The official rulebook is absolutely not designed to create fair, balanced competition. It is meticulously designed to trap players in a vicious cycle of financial dependency and total physical exhaustion. The reality is, the rules are literal weapons, and Steve Simon acted as the chief executioner for years. Let us look directly at the actual verified documents. Under the official WTA rulebook, the specific regulations regarding late withdrawals are entirely rigged against the athlete. A player is legally forced to commit to tournaments weeks, sometimes months in advance. If they sustain a severe injury during that time, they are harshly and unfairly punished. The executives intentionally created a system where players must burn through a highly limited number of withdrawal amnesties. Once those arbitrary amnesties are gone, the financial fines are absolutely astronomical. This predatory system forces severely injured players to step onto the court against their own doctor's strict medical orders. The WTA is literally profiting off the physical pain and suffering of their greatest athletes. They systematically bleed the heroes dry just to line their own corporate pockets. If a player tries to rest, the system fines them into submission. It is a textbook extortion racket hidden behind the guise of professional sports. The corruption goes even deeper when you look at how the fines are actually distributed. When an umpire hands out a code violation, like the one given to Mirra Andreeva, the player is hit with an immediate financial penalty. The WTA legally seizes that money directly from the player's hard-earned prize pool. They claim these fines are used for administrative purposes. The reality is, it is just another revenue stream for a greedy corporation. The executives literally profit from the subjective, often incorrect decisions of their own umpires. It is a massive conflict of interest that goes completely unchecked. The officials are incentivized to hand out penalties to boost the bottom line. This is why young, vulnerable players are targeted so frequently. They do not have the institutional power to fight back against the immediate deduction of their earnings. The rulebook is not a guide for fair play, it is a financial extraction tool. But that is just the tip of the terrifying iceberg. Let us fully expose the mandatory WTA 1000 event structure. The ranking system is based on a rolling 52-week period. The rigged system forces top-tier players to compete in specific combined 1,000-level tournaments throughout the grueling calendar year. If a player physically cannot play and misses just one of these mandatory events, they are hit with a devastating 0-point penalty. This 0-point penalty is a blatant, highly coercive intimidation tactic. The computer ranking system dictates a player's absolute worth in the industry. Tanking their ranking means losing critical tournament seedings and vital sponsorships. Losing sponsorships means the total end of their career. Steve Simon actively used this specific rule to ensure the exhausted stars always showed up. He needed to guarantee the lucrative television revenue for his corporate partners. He did not care for a single second if Elena Rybakina had just played a grueling 3-hour match at 3 in the morning. He only cared about keeping the broadcast partners happy and the money flowing. The executives demanded absolute, unquestioning obedience from every single woman on the tour. If a player bravely spoke out about the dangerous conditions, they were immediately targeted by the officials. They were penalized on the court and fined off the court. This is the absolute classic villain playbook in action. Deceive the industry, manipulate the complex rules, and ruthlessly silence the victims. But the players are no longer staying silent, and the executives are terrified. The undeniable financial evidence surrounding the WTA is equally damning and completely verified. While the brave players constantly fight for basic equal pay and safe working conditions, the executives selfishly hoard the wealth. In 2023, the WTA proudly established a new commercial arm called WTA Ventures. This was done in direct partnership with CVC Capital Partners. The executives loudly promised this deal would magically revolutionize the sport and enrich the players. The documented truth is, it was a desperate, calculated cash grab. It was designed entirely to save Steve Simon's failing, bankrupt regime. The executives eagerly took massive amounts of private equity money while aggressively cutting corners on essential player safety. The Cancun disaster proves exactly where that massive influx of money did not go. It certainly did not go toward building proper, safe stadium infrastructure. It did not go toward creating fair, health-conscious tournament scheduling. It went directly into the bloated corporate machine. This sheer, unfiltered greed triggered a massive, highly publicized industry backlash. The global tennis industry is finally actively distancing itself from this deceitful leadership team. Powerful broadcasters and massive corporate sponsors are waking up to the harsh reality of the situation. Respected tennis legends are publicly cutting ties with the executives. Martina Navratilova forcefully demanded that Steve Simon immediately leave his post on national television. She stated clearly that his leadership position was completely untenable and a disaster for the sport. The embarrassment for the WTA was absolute and total. The walls were rapidly closing in on the corrupt CEO as his allies abandoned him. His desperate accusations against the players were rapidly falling apart under the slightest scrutiny. He pathetically tried to blame the athletes for simply not adapting to the hurricane conditions in Cancun. He boldly tried to claim that the tour was doing everything physically possible to protect them. But the undeniable video evidence from both Cancun and Montreal proved he was lying through his teeth. The internal documents prove he knew about the catastrophic failures well in advance. The players were entirely innocent in every single scenario. They were simply asking for a safe, professional working environment without the threat of financial ruin. The corrupt system tried everything in its power to frame these brave women as ungrateful. But the reality is, the WTA is absolutely nothing without its star players. Elena Rybakina's fierce defiance in the dark hours of Montreal sparked a global revolution against the executives. Mirra Andreeva's incredibly brave stand against a corrupt, manipulative umpire inspired an entirely new generation of athletes. Iga Swiatek's flawless, dominant victory in the middle of a literal hurricane proved a vital point. It proved that pure, unadulterated talent cannot be suppressed by gross corporate sabotage. These powerful women are the true, undeniable heroes of professional tennis. They are fighting an exhausting, uphill battle against an entrenched, highly manipulative bureaucracy. And against all odds, they are winning the war. The total downfall of Steve Simon is now a fully confirmed fact. When Portia Archer was finally brought in to replace Steve Simon as CEO, it was framed as a fresh start, but the reality is, it was a desperate cover-up. The executives needed a new face to present to the angry sponsors and the furious players. They needed a distraction from the undeniable fact that the entire foundation of the tour was compromised. Steve Simon was allowed to remain as a chairman, a disgusting compromise that proves the rot is still deeply embedded. However, his day-to-day operational power was entirely gutted by the player mutiny. The heroes forced the board's hand and exposed his corruption to the world. Without the bravery of Elena Rybakina calling out the Montreal trap, the revolution would never have started. Without Iga Swiatek proving the executives wrong in Cancun, the manipulative leadership would have survived. The players completely dismantled the villain's absolute authority. His professional reputation is in an absolute, irreversible freefall. The sports industry finally sees him for what he truly is. He is a calculated, deceitful manipulator who constantly put corporate profits over human people. The WTA is currently scrambling in a desperate attempt to save face. They are begging the broadcasters to believe that the broken system is magically fixing itself. But the players know the real truth. The deep structural rot is still there. It is permanently written into the very rulebook they actively use to punish teenagers and exhaust reigning champions. The fight for the soul of women's tennis is far from over. The heroes will continue to systematically dismantle the corrupt machine piece by piece. They will aggressively expose every single rigged draw and every malicious rule change. They will highlight every unfair, financially crippling fine. They will call out every single late-night scheduling trap designed to break their bodies. The dark era of silent, unquestioning obedience is completely dead. Steve Simon thought he'd destroy Elena Rybakina, but he only destroyed himself.